Hello and welcome to this session of In Conversation With. And today we have with us Kunashni Parikh. Kunashni is a sports psychologist and a mental health professional who works with players at national and international level with their mental training. Additionally, she has also been the vice captain and goalkeeper of the Junior India national football team, goalkeeper of the Vancouver United Football Club in Canada, and the captain of the Maharashtra state football team, as well as a national level gymnast. Our conversation today, which is in two parts, centers around psychology on and off the field. And without taking up much time, let's dive in to hear more from Kunashni. So Kunashni, starting, with the whole aspect of mental health and wellness and sport, very often we get this recommendation that, play sports, exercise, do any movement-based activity because that can help boost your mental health. Can you throw some more light on this connection and, why is this advocated so much?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm super excited to be on this conversation series.
Likewise.
And yeah, so to get straight to the question, people talk a lot about the benefits of exercise and, we should do it. But I think to understand more deeply what exact effects has on our body and our mind together, I would divide it into two parts. So one is when we exercise, it's not just making us physically fitter, it's also causing a lot of changes in the brain. And we see through studies have shown that when you exercise, there are a lot of neurochemical changes that are going on. You see an increase in the gray matter volume of different regions like the prefrontal cortex. You see enhanced functionality between the systems. New neural connections are being born. So this all happens because different chemicals are secreted during any kind of physical exercise that you do. Even endorphins, the feel-good hormone.
Right.
It makes you good, it reduces stress. It's a natural painkiller. It's inside your body. So these are a lot of biological changes that are going on, which then reflect in, enhanced learning, enhanced ability to recall information. And studies have also shown that when people go through anxiety or depression, one of the main ways to tackle these illnesses is through a process called behavioral activation, and that means making yourself move, making your body move, and to ignite some kind of changes in the brain. And when this happens, they've shown that physical exercise works as well in mild cases of depression, anxiety, as well as antidepressants or anti-anxiety pills. So there's a huge connection between what's going on when we physically exercise and the impact on our overall physical and mental health. And another thing that actually comes to mind is not just these brain changes, but even our behavior. So when we engage in sport, it's not just an individual activity, right? You're playing with other people. So you're enhancing your social skills, your communication skills are developing, your leadership skills on the field. So there's just so many other psychological benefits. And especially in kids, when they start earlier, there's so many developmental changes that keep on happening, and it just makes your mind sharper, it makes you feel more active, makes you feel light. So overall, when you move, when you exercise, it the whole whatever is happening in your body enhances your overall well-being.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I mean, I think you've covered a lot of different aspects. You've told us a little bit about, specifically for few mental health conditions. Now, coming to the next question, which is like, how important do you think it is for sports people to look after their own mental health and well-being? I mean, obviously, you mentioned that sport itself helps you, but how important is it as a sports person to look after, their mental health?
It's super important. I think it's very often neglected. So when you're playing sport, it's not just, the physical game that's going on. There's just so much mental stress and mental pressure. When you're performing, when it goes to the high pressure tournaments, when it goes to the finals, there's so much performance anxiety. There's so much pressure from the coaches, from your parents, from your own expectations. So this all takes a toll on your mental health. Also, the whole routine and the regime of being a professional athlete and the kind of sacrifices you have to make in your life to have that kind of professional athlete lifestyle. So this all takes a toll on your mental health. And if you're not actively engaging in self-care and taking care of your mental well-being as well as your physical well-being, then you're going to see some negative effects. And this is often what happens with athletes. It's a huge area that's ignored. And unfortunately, it's not something that's well spoken about or talked about. So it's definitely, like you mentioned, super important for athletes to focus on their mental health.
Just, taking that forward, you yourself have been a professional athlete, Kunashni. You've been involved in so many sports, over the years. How have you taken care of your mental health? And, are there any challenges which you specifically faced, over the years?
Yeah, I mean, like, I, as an athlete, have also gone through a lot of ups and downs. I think that's the whole part of the sport, right? You go through wins, you go through losses, and that's just how it is. But personally, I can recount one incident of my life when I was training for the national camp to make it to the Indian team as the goalkeeper of the team in football. And right before we were about to leave for the international tournament, in one of the practice games, I was in the goal, ready to make the next save. It was during the match. The forward was coming with the ball, about to strike, and I dived for the ball. I saved the ball, but unfortunately, that opponent's leg, her knee, came and hit straight onto my nose,
Oh
and I
my God.
fractured my, and it
Oh
was
my God.
bleeding completely, and I had to be taken to the local hospital that was there. My parents came down, and unfortunately, I was not able to get the fitness certificate to travel with the team, and that delayed my professional career a lot in football. I wasn't able to play, and I remember at that time that it was not just a physical injury, but it took a toll on me mentally, because
Right.
as an athlete, go through something that that affects your that affects your sports career, it really makes you question your self identity. Like, a lot of athletes, their identity is tied to their sport and how they play. So there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of disappointment, there's a lot of frustration, anger, anxiety. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get back? So this is something that I also went through as an athlete, and how I got out of it. I mean, reflecting back, I just remember that it took time. It was a slow process, but through refocusing on the things that I had and making small goals, working on small goals to get back to my recovery, I think I finally got back. And eventually, when we had the next tournament for our school team, I took the school team to the state championship, which happened for
Wow.
the first time in 8 years in our school history. So it's all about, it happens, but how you get back. And the more resilient you are mentally, the more you enhance your mental skills, mental well-being, you'll be able to get back much faster and much stronger. So this is one thing I remember, how I managed to take care of myself. I remember there's some other instances where, and it always happens, like, when you're playing, your confidence is low, sometimes you're not able to communicate with your teammates well. So in those moments, what I wish I would have done is just talk to the players, talk to the coaches, there's something I'm going through. And I think this is something most athletes should know, that if there's an
Right.
issue, you have to speak up about it and address it immediately. And it's going to make your game and your whole teammate's life much more smoother.
No, I
Yeah.
think, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, it's really, I'm sure a lot of people will draw a lot of inspiration from it. Like, the way you've bounced back, the way you've moved forward over the years, continued playing, continued pursuing, and, reaching such levels. So, and as you said, I think it's important to be resilient, to have that grit, whether it's in sport, whether it's in anything. I mean, disappointments come and go, but the reason I asked you specifically is because I feel like, sports persons tend to face that disappointment of winning, losing, fitness, injury far more often. And right, like, rightly you said that a lot of your identity is tied to you as a sports person. So what do you do when, you hit that void of sorts? And we see that in players at all times, especially when you're like, like you're younger, but towards the end of your career, when you have an injury which sort of threatens your entire career, suddenly what do you do? So,
True.
I mean,
And
no,
I,
thank you for throwing that light.
of
Go on, you
course,
were
and I
saying.
think that's when counseling comes into play. That's when, a sports psychologist or mental health professional, if they step in, the recovery goes much smoother and much faster. And that's the whole essence of, counseling and mental health support that I think athletes should take the advantage of.
Right. And, just stemming from that, do you think we have, enough facilities for athletes, in terms of mental health support? Because this is just linked to what we just spoke about. And do you think we have enough? I mean, you're a sports psychologist now, so I think that's absolutely amazing. So, but in general, do you think we have enough support available?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, even going up to the national team, and I can speak from my own experience at the Indian team level, like growing up in my sports career, I didn't even know what a sports psychologist was until much later.
Right.
And there were times when, forget a sports psychologist, the team didn't even have the support of a physiotherapist or medical
Okay.
first aid, which is super essential to have, when you're playing a high intensity sport. So I think, and in addition to that, the hostel facilities, the kind of nutrition that the athletes are given on a daily basis, I think there's a lot that still needs to be improved in terms of the facilities that are provided and mental training. There's a long way to go to see this entire field being integrated into the infrastructure of the sporting system. But hopefully, like you mentioned, I'm on that track to get more people and be like, okay, let's do this. Athletes, mental health, let's focus on that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really hoping that, more people who watch this conversation get inspired, either to ask questions or to take up this field, look at you, find out more about what you're doing, for instance. So now, this is another facet of you is that you are a sports psychologist, as we said. So, every day you meet a lot of people, you hear a lot of people's concerns. So at the end of the day, how do you sort of take care of your own mental health, so that you can like not take on other people's problems, onto yourself beyond a point?
Oh, that's a good question. So that the answer to that learning came with time. It took some time, and to learn how to balance that. And what I learned is to really try and differentiate between my work life and my life, personal life, and to have a very strong boundary. Because if you carry your work with you home, even if you're working from home, you need to have that boundary. And drawing lockdown, most of us are working from home, so it kind of sometimes you might blur those boundaries. But it's very important, especially when you're dealing with a lot of clients and a lot of trauma and a lot of you know issues that people are dealing with. It does cause some amount of mental burden, so you have to be able to zoom out from that and keep these things separate. Other than that, I like to spend time just relaxing, taking a break. Yoga, that's my go-to. So every day I start my morning with my yoga ritual, and followed by meditation. And whenever I can, I go to the beach and I sit there. So that's how I take some time out just for myself, and that's what I love doing. And also creative things, just give me a pen, paper, or anything. And I think when you focus your attention into some kind of creative task, it really takes you to another world. And I think that's very important, not just for me as a psychologist, but for anybody to give time to that and engage throughout the week.
No, I
Yeah.
think you're very right, that we need to take care of ourselves at so many different levels, like personally, professionally. And I think for you, you're wearing so many hats. So that's why I was quite curious to know, how do you take care of yourself, like as a psychologist? I already asked you how you take care of yourself as a sports person. So wrapping up this segment, my last question to you would be that, what are some lessons that you think we can learn from sport that we can apply to our day-to-day lives? I mean, you mentioned some of the skills earlier on, like, communicating, leadership, working with the team. But are there any other lessons you feel that, we can carry forward?
Definitely. I think, and talking about, coming back from injury and coming back from losses and disappointments and failures, I think sports teaches you a lot about how to bounce back. So basically, resilience, which is the ability to, you know, come back to pre-crisis level, pre-crisis situation. So, and there are different traits, I think, that get enhanced when you learn to be more resilient from sports. So this is just just from remembering what are the different things that make a resilient athlete. So one of the things is having a strong sense of self-awareness. That's super important, and I think this comes with understanding yourself within your sport. Another factor is acceptance, so accepting the situation as it is, being mindful, so not continuously living the past and things that went wrong and ruminating about those things, or being worried about the future and living in a time that hasn't come yet. So completely being mindful, focusing on what's going on right now. So if we're having a conversation in this series on this Zoom call, my full attention is on the screen here and talking about this and not worrying about, oh, what am I going to make for dinner, and oh, I have my next call,
Yeah.
things like that. So this is, I think, in sport very important, because in your sport, and especially this is in high intensity sports and high risk sports. So I was reading something about skiing. So skiing is one very high adrenaline rush sport,
Right.
where if you are not completely mentally present, it can be life threatening.
Of
It
course.
can be dangerous to your survival. So if while you're going down that hill at like, crazy level of speed, if your mind is somewhere else and you don't see that next rock or that boulder coming up, you're going to flip and fall. So I think sports really teaches you how to ground yourself in that present moment. So it's super, super important. So that's one thing. And I think it also teaches you to be more optimistic in life and have a sense, have a higher sense of purpose, like living for something greater than yourself. And I think these are all the things that I've learned personally from sport, and I see many different athletes also imbibing from their sports journey. So this is definitely something, other than the leadership, communication, all that, that sports really teaches you.
I think that's very insightful. So, thanks for sharing that. And for all our viewers who've been part of the discussion, please stay tuned. We have part 2 coming up soon, where we're going to explore more topics with Kunashni. And I hope everyone who's watching this, please like, share, subscribe, and keep up with our content. If you found this useful, you can drop your comments. And just to end this, I'd like to say that if you or anyone is having a hard time with your mental health, please reach out for help. It's not, there's no shame in that. There is no stigma, and there is help available, because I don't think anyone deserves to suffer in silence. So till then, stay well and stay healthy. Thank you.